Waiting for the brother to come back. He's the one. He gives me okay to start. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Inshallah, in today's talk, which is in this series of talks regarding the lives of the Sahaba under the title of Living Legends, this is the 7th talk we are having. Just to remind that the things that we have talked about already, so we will have a connection to the previous talks. Even though we're talking about the lives of the Sahaba, the method that I am using to talk about the lives of Sahaba is a little bit different than what we have done in the past in other masjid. So instead of going and talking about just one Sahabi's life, and in some cases, if you're talking about Sahaba like Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, if you talk about them, that would take years to really talk about those Sahaba. So instead, we are going through in a chronological order of the Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and time-wise, as the da'wah was progressing, we are looking into the role of some of the Sahaba. Obviously, we will not be able to cover all Sahaba's lives in between also, but the role of Sahaba in that specific time and era. So that will give us a clarity in understanding how the da'wah progressed from the time of the inception that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was given the wahi the first time, and then how the da'wah progressed to the point that we see that the da'wah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam can be divided into multiple phases. And I'll kind of talk about that. But so far, we did talk about the conversion. First we talked about why we are studying the life of Sahaba. We understand that the purpose is to learn how Sahaba carried the Islam, because they were the best example, they're the best generation for us after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we have lessons to learn from. We talked about conversion of some of the Sahaba and how they came into fold of Islam at different times, right? But we wanted to see that how the Sahaba's lives changed drastically just by accepting Islam. They haven't even spent too long of a time with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the state of Islam yet, but we find that their response to the call was immediate, and once they became Muslim, you don't see that they are coming up with excuses of not following the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal. Rather, we see that as they were becoming Muslims, they were entering into fold of Islam completely. Whatever Islam was there at that time was revealed. They were following what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded them, and they were staying away from whatever Allah Azza wa Jal prohibited. At the same time, we also understand as humans, of course, humans can have shortcomings as well. So that's not what we're talking about. We understand. But Sahaba, Ridwanullah alayhim, as a whole, they don't make mistakes. They not make mistakes. Because Allah Azza wa Jal was pleased with them and they were pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? Now you can see the differences among the Sahaba. That's a separate discussion, a subject that can be discussed some other time, inshallah. Or if there's any question, we can talk about that as well. So we talked about how Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh, he entered into the fold of Islam. Then we talked about Salman Farsi, and we see a distinction between them. Umar was of a different kind of a personality before Islam, one of the people who were against Islam until he accepted Islam. And then once he got into the fold of Islam, we see a direct change right away, a change in his life. And we see that how Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh, one who was going to kill Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam on his way, and he entered into the fold of Islam in the very same scene, and he becomes Al-Faruq, the one who distinguished between the haqq and the batil, from the falsehood and the truth. And then we talked a bit about Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh last week, how he entered into the fold of Islam. Yes, he was the one who responded to call of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam without questioning Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam because of many reasons. One, we talked about one thing was he was already in search of the haqq, and he did his research prior to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was appointed as a prophet. And he was a very close friend of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was very easy for him to recognize him that he is the Prophet of Allah when the call was coming from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam towards Islam. And Mus'ab ibn Umair radiallahu anh, how he came into fold of Islam. And we find that the miraculous Quran played a huge role in their lives of accepting this deen. And then Usayd ibn Hudayr and Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh radiallahu anh, they were from Yathrib, Medina. So we talked about people who came into Islam, people like Abu Bakr Siddiq, who became Muslim right away. You know, one of the very first people who entered into the fold of Islam, accepted Islam from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then we talked about people like Usayd ibn Hudayr and Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh, which they became Muslim at the end of almost the Meccan era, and they were in Yathrib, they were in Medina at that time. And they accepted Islam. And the impact of people who entered the fold of Islam was different for different people. Abu Bakr, because of him, the very big Sahaba that came to Islam from him, Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, Zubayr ibn al-Awwam, Uthman ibn Affan, anhum, and many other Sahaba like Talha ibn Ubaydullah, they became Muslim through Abu Bakr Siddiq in the very early stages of the da'wah of Abu Bakr. And he started doing the da'wah right after he became Muslim. He did not sit back and wait for he will become he will study Islam under Rasulullah for a very long period of time. Then he will start talking about Islam. Whatever he had the knowledge of, he started conveying to the people. Okay, so these are things that we talked about, and we saw a very clear idea in it that they accepted Islam in a rational manner. So their belief, their aqidah, their iman was firm because it was firmly installed in the first place, because they were rationally convinced with this, the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's existence and his oneness, and the Tawheed, and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam being the messenger of Allah, and the Quran is the Kalam Allah, book of Allah Azza wa Jal. This was their basic belief. This was a basic belief, and they were convinced with that, and that was sufficient for them to move according to Allah Azza wa Jal was commanding. So that's the beginning point. We want to make sure that we understand that, because this is a question we ask a lot of time to ourselves, that how come we see when we study the life of Sahaba are moved, but when we look at ourselves, and many a times we don't find ourselves moved by our aqeedah or iman the way the Sahaba moved. And this is something we have to really think and question and come to the conclusion of our own. And that's going to help us when we are carrying the aqeedah of our own. Let's not be the one who are just copying the aqeedah of the others. We have to think, and we have to be convinced with our with the aqeedah of Islam, iman and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam being the messenger of the Quran, being the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the real driving force for any Muslim. Okay, so we have to think about that. And the verses that reveal in the beginning of the da'wah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam were addressing these basic tenets of Islam, the aqeedah of Islam, and the iman in the basic things. Now, we understand that there's a difference between the aqeedah and the ahkam. Aqeedah is something that we talked about, that we cannot do the taqleed. When we say taqleed, there is no imitation. We don't say that okay, we are Muslim because our parents were Muslim, and that's sufficient. No, everybody has to carry this. We believe in Allah not because of that, because our parents believe in Allah. Even though we are Muslim because we're born in a Muslim family, but this belief has to be our own. And that's what binds us. So we have to have this clarity in the Iman. We have to have the clarity in this Aqidah of Islam. Okay. Now moving to today's talk, inshallah, and I want to remind that when we talk about the da'wah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as we are trying to see the role of Sahaba in the da'wah of Rasulullah, the call of Islam, we can see that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam life can be divided into two very distinct phases. One is prior to migration, and second is post-migration. The one which is prior to migration is called the Meccan era, and the one which is after migration is called Madani era. It is such an important aspect that our Quran is even divided into these two categories. When you open the Quran, we always see that the top on of the chapter of the Quran, it would say it's a Makki surah or a Madani surah. That's what it is talking about. And it is such an important aspect of it that Ibn Abbas, radiallahu anhu, he says a person who cannot distinguish between the Makki and the Madani surah, he does not have a right to do the tafsir of the Quran. Because that's problematic. You would start applying wrong rules at wrong places. Some of the verses are referred as nasikh wa mansukh. If you do not know which one revealed first, which one revealed later, we will not be able to say which one is nasikh, which one is mansukh. Nasikh and mansukh means abrogated and abrogator. So a verse came, a hukum came, and it abrogated the previous one. Okay, so this is why it's important to know that. That's number one thing. Now, when you talk about the Meccan era can be, some scholars, they would divide into two distinct phases, some would say three. That doesn't really matter. Important thing is to see what was done in the two or the three phases of the da'wah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Meccan time. So first stage is, which is referred as, which we will talk about today a little bit, it's called a secret call, or call of privacy, or it's called as the one that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was carrying the da'wah to individuals, and the society at large was not addressed in the manner that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was looking for the change in that society at that time. Now, so that's the first phase. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was commanded after these 3 years, when, as some of the reports talk about, there were about 39 or 40 people who became Muslim at that time. About 40 people became Muslim. And Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu was the 40th one at that time, as some of the reports talk about. So that is the time when Allah commanded Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to fasda' bima tu'mar wa'id al-mushrikeen. And then some of the scholars, they divide this phase into another phase, which is after the year of grief. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was commanded to go for other tribes as well. Outside the Meccans, go and ask for nusrah, support from them. Accept Islam and support Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to establish the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Madani era is, as a whole, is a Madani era where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself was a ruler, a hakim over there. Of course, he continued to be a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but he also became a hakim, a ruler as well. Okay. Scholars divide the Madani era also further, but since we're talking about Makkah, we'll stick with that. And today we'll talk about that specific private call of secrecy. What was some of the roles of some of the Sahaba? Why we are talking about that? Let's not forget, from the beginning of the da'wah, that was clear to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that this da'wah was sent for the whole alameen. Yeah. So like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, illa dhikrun lil alameen, that it is not but a dhikr, a reminder for the alameen, for mankind and the jinn kind. Okay, and this surah was Surah Al-Qalam, according to some of the Mufassirin, this was the second surah that was revealed to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then in the Surah Al-Takwir also, one of the very first surah that was revealed to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, "In huwa illa dhikrun lil alamin." That means that this Quran is no less than a reminder for alameen, mankind and the jinns. Again, see that, keep this in mind whenever we study this. We have to have an understanding what we are talking about. Okay. Now, I want to remind one more thing, which we have talked about this, but because sometimes I see new faces here, I want to make sure that we are all on the same page. Not to drag back the talk, but it's still to remember that, which is another aspect of that people get confused by is that, well, fine, what you talk about with Islam was the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was one thing, but now we are today, we're weak people, we are not like Sahaba. How can we act like them? We did not exist in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah was there. If we were there, we would have been different people than today's time. Well, see, Al-Miqdad bin Aswad radiallahu anh, there's a hadith, actually, hadith in a sense of the report of a Sahabi. It talks about that once he was sitting with Jubayr bin Nufair and one of the people passed by and he said to Al-Miqdad bin Aswad, because of this verse, as Ibn Kathir is discussing about the word قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. They're talking about وَالَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ. When talked about those that bake them as a coolness of our eyes. For because of this verse, this person was passing by, he looked at Al-Miqdad and he said, he praised those eyes and he wished that he would have been present in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Al-Miqdad bin Aswad became angry at him. This is why I want to bring this up, because many times we think of it, oh, we would act differently if we were in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Miqdad get angry at him. And Jubayr bin Nufair was confused, why is he angry? And he turned back to this person and he said, why do you hope for something that Allah Azza wa Jal hope differently than that? Allah's decree was you're supposed to be in this time. Allah, why do you hope other than what Allah has built for you? That's one thing. Second aspect, what he was trying to say, what he said, Miqdad was, you don't know what these eyes have seen. You don't know. There are people in the time of Rasulullah, they rejected Rasulullah as a Nabi. Aren't you happy that Allah made you a Muslim from the womb of your mother and came out and among the parents who were Muslims? We saw people, after we became Muslim, we saw some of us, our fathers, our brothers, our sons, they did not accept Islam, and we knew that if they die like that, they will be in hellfire. And it was a very painful thing for us to think of. So same thing goes for us. Let's not think of this way. If we were in Sahaba's time, we would have been different people. No. Allah is the one who placed us in this time. And He knows the best. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do not put the burden on anyone except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him the capability of the burden. And every one of you will be get the ajr reward for what good he has done, and he will be punished for whatever wrong that he has done. Of course, if Allah wills, if He forgives somebody. So keep this always in mind when we talk about. Now, when it comes to da'wah of Islam, it's first to remember, when we study Sahaba's lives about their da'wah, that applies to us. So we have to act accordingly as well. And this is a great honor for us to carry this message to the mankind. Prophets were sent in the past to do this job. Now this is our job. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Ud'u ila sabili rabbika bil hikmati wal mau'izati al hasanah." Call to the Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, invite the people. Invite for what? To the way of your Rabb with hikmah and mau'izat al hasanah. Okay. Hikmah is the subject. I will discuss one of the talks, inshallah, in more detail. I want to just make sure that we leave today's talk with this idea at least. Hikmah translates as wisdom, true. But in the Quran, hikmah is always used very tightly connected to the wahy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes it's used for sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sometimes it's used for the prophethood. Sometimes it's used for the judgment based on the wahy, and so on and so forth. So it is always connected with the wahy from Allah Azza wa Jalla. So hikmah never means that making excuses to say it's wisdom not to talk about Islam. It cannot be hikmah. Not to talk about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us can never be hikmah. Because this Quran and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came from Al-Hakim. This is one of the names of Allah Azza wa Jal. He is the one who has revealed the hikmah to us. So the hikmah is through the wahy that came to us. Yes, they can be used in different contexts, but hikmah never means to compromise on the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal. Okay? And when we talk about that, in the beginning of the da'wah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in Surah Al-Qalam, when these kuffar tried to make compromises with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Rasulullah فَلَا تُطِعِ الْمُكَذِّبِينَ, do not follow these liars. وَدُّوا لَوْ تُدْهِنُوا فَيُدْهِنُونَ, that they want, they love you, that you will become lenient and make compromises, so we will make compromise with you. Like the Shaykh was reciting the surah, Surah Al-Kafirun, Allah Azza wa Jalla revealed to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينِ. You have your way of life, we have our way of life. We should not be thinking of there can be something productive come out in the middle path or something. The only productivity can come from the haqq from Allah Azza wa Jalla. Nothing else. Anything else may look good to us, but it may not be. Okay. Now moving on to the subject today. When the first verses of the Quran was revealed to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, khalaqa al-insana min 'alaq, and so on and so forth. When this is the first time Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was given the wahi, and he was very anxious. He was very scared in the beginning to see an angel like that. Now, we talked about this a little bit briefly, but I want to talk about a different angle about the very same thing. But this is the beginning of the da'wah. What did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam do when the first verses revealed to him? He went back to his wife, Khadija radiallahu anha. And she was one of the biggest supporters of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam throughout her life, in the days when he was not appointed as a prophet, and after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was appointed as a prophet, until she passed away. To the point when she passed away, that year is referred as in our history books, in our seerah books, as Aam al-Huzn. Why is it called Aam al-Huzn? The year of grief. Because of the passing away of Khadija radiallahu anha, the wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and of course the uncle of Rasulullah, Abu Talib. They passed away between few months apart. Now, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went to Khadija radiallahu anha, she made a very, she comforted Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam at that time. This is one of the most difficult times for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the person who comforted Rasulullah was no one but his own wife, beloved wife, Khadija radiallahu anha. She supported Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in emotional way and financial way, to the point that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had enough time to go and do the da'wah of Islam. So that thing was covered for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So but when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was appointed as a prophet, and he went back to Khadija radiallahu anha, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was comforted by Khadija, and two of the incidents are mentioned about that. One was, she reminded him that Allah is not going to put you through any difficult thing while you are the one who take care of the kith and the kins and take care of the guests. He's the one who connects who does the salatul rahim, meaning bring the families together instead of the one who break the families. And so she brought she said words to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that comforted Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And she did not stop there. She was a knowledgeable person as well. So now when Rasulullah is going through this confusion time in the beginning, from the perspective of that the first time the wahi came to him. So I want to make sure that we don't misunderstand the word confusion I used. It's the first time wahi came to him. So she took him to her cousin, Waraqa bin Nawfal radiallahu anhu. So now, when I say Waraqa bin Nawfal radiallahu anhu, there is many difference of opinions about him being, whether he was a Sahabi or not. Okay, so Khadija, she became a Muslimah right away. So there's no doubt that she was the first Muslim, the first person who came to the fold of Islam. About the second, third, fourth, there is ikhtilaf about that. But we'll move on about Waraqah bin Nawfal. So the reason she took him, Rasulullah there, because she was aware that he is aware of the previous messengers and the previous books that were revealed to the previous prophets. So she took him there, and Waraqah bin Nawfal, he is the one who right away is asking him questions, what he saw, asking the description of Jibreel. And when he mentioned all the information, he said, oh, this is the same Namus who went to Musa. Namus was a word used for the angel. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Jibreel to all the prophets with the message. So he recognized that, and he said that to him, oh, my nephew, that I wish that I will be able to support you. He said, I wish I lived that long when your people will make you leave, and I will be able to support you at that time. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was kind of confused about this remark by Waraqah. And he said, are they going to make me leave my land? Look, he is the person who is loved by his own people. Loved by his people to the extent they used to call him Sadiq al-Amin, that he's the truthful, the honest one. That's his title, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the days of Jahiliyyah. The kuffar, they used to call him the truthful and the honest one. Now Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is hearing that because of this message, he will have to leave his land. And he's talking about based on the knowledge that the Ahlul Kitab, the people of the book, had about the coming new prophet. So now, he left from Waraqah bin Nawfal, and Waraqah bin Nawfal actually passed away a few days after this wahi was revealed to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, why he was referred as some of the scholars as the messenger, as a Sahabi, while the others did not, is because of he did not reject Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Number one thing, and the wordings that he used, it seems like he accepted Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's one aspect of it. Other thing is about Waraqah bin Nawfal is there's a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that talks about Waraqah bin Nawfal that he will be placed in the Jannah. So the scholars are kind of a split, but all of them agree on, even if he did not accept Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was a believer in the message that came before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because there was a cessation, or the message was stopped, wahi was stopped after the first wahi for a few days. Some of the scholars say years, but the more accurate one is few days. And this is a few days when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was feeling more anxious. And one day when he did see again Jibreel, he came home and he started saying to his wife, Zammiluni, Zammiluni, that cover me, cover me. And when he was covered and when he calmed down, and one of the reports talk about that, after that, he was taken to Waraqah bin Nawfal. Some talk about that he was taken to Waraqah bin Nawfal prior to that. But regardless of that, Khadija radiallahu anha, she played a very important role from the day when the da'wah was revealed to Rasulullah, the wahi was revealed to Rasulullah. So let's not forget her role. And that role continued on. Sometimes you don't realize that in the background many things are happening. As a wife, she continued to support throughout the 10 years of the da'wah when she was alive. And those 10 years were one very difficult times for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the way the Meccans were treating Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is why we find that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said about the 4 women of the Jannah. When he said, Afdalun Nisa Ahl al-Jannah Khadijah bint Khuwaylid. Then Rasulullah said, the best of the women of the Jannah are, who are they? Khadijah bint Khuwaylid, one. Second, Fatima bint Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the third one was Maryam bint Imran, the mother of Isa alayhi salam. And the fourth one was Asiya. Asiya was a wife of Fir'aun. Okay, so these are the best people, the best women of the Jannah. And these four, the way they are mentioned, they all have different kinds of personalities. And that should be studied of their own some other time, inshallah. So we get an idea of why these four are so important. Since we are talking about Khadija, we'll talk about Khadija right now. So Khadija radiallahu anha was the person who was from the people of Jannah. Now, one of the key things to remember here is why Khadija radiallahu anha was so receptive of the message came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. It is one of the key things is Rasulullah sallallahu said, "Khayrukum khayrukum li ahli." Okay, best among you are the ones who are best with their families. Some of them translate as their wives. And then Rasulullah said, "Wa ana khayrukum li ahli." And I am the best among you who is the best with his family and the wives. So, and the wives are very close to the husbands. They are aware of all the shortcomings and the strengths of a person. And Khadija radiallahu anha lived with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for past 15 years. And she was very well aware of the characteristics of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She was married him when she was 40 and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was 25 years old. She was already a widow. This was the first marriage of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She's the only wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam who bare children of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then the child was to Maria Qibtiyya, which is Ibrahim, which is a separate discussion. But all the children were through Khadija radiallahu anha. All the children of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away in his life except one, which was Fatima radiallahu anha, who passed away about 6 months after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away. So that was the Khadija in a short way. Now, second person that is important to know, and many people do not talk about it, this is why I'm picking his name. When the da'wah of Islam started, we know that Abu Bakr, Khadija, Abu Bakr, Ali, and Zayd bin al-Harith, they came into Islam in the very, one of the reports talks about the first day, other talks about in a few days. So these four are known, well known. Okay. Now other ones are Abdullah bin Mas'ud is one of them. Now the seventh one which is mentioned, I don't know about the fifth or the sixth or the fifth one, I forgot. But the seventh one which is mentioned is Arqam bin Abi Arqam radiallahu anhu. And the reason it is important for us to know about Arqam, even though we don't know many things about him directly, but we know about is how huge of a role he has played in the da'wah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. First of all, when you talk about Al-Arqam radiallahu anhu, he was the seventh person, according to a report, who came into fold of Islam. Seventh person. Of course, when you say Arqam bin Abi Al-Arqam, that means that son of the father of the Arqam, which is he himself. So his father's name was Abu Arqam is a kunya. His father's name was Abdul Manaf, Ibn Asad, Ibn Abdullah, Ibn Amr, Ibn Makhzum. It's important for us to know his lineage here, because this played a huge role in the da'wah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well. Banu Makhzum was somebody, the tribe which was, you can think of it like who's competing with the tribe of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam throughout. Who was from Banu Makhzum? Other person from Banu Makhzum was Abu Jahl. The leader of Banu Makhzum was Abu Jahl. So the one who was neck to neck. And Abu Jahl, in one of the statements, says, Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah radiallahu anhu, he says, he was a man from Taif, once visited Mecca, and he was walking with Abu Jahl. And in the street, when they came across Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Rasulullah invited Amr bin Hisham. Amr bin Hisham is the name of Abu Jahl towards Islam. So he said, Rasulullah said to him, why don't you accept Islam and believe in me as the messenger? Rasulullah. Amr bin Hisham said, "Oh Muhammad, when you are going to stop cursing our gods, okay? If you want us to testify that you have fulfilled your mission, we will testify for you." Meaning, if you want to just testify that you convey the message, we'll testify. But you have to stop cursing our gods. And he said, and if you knew that you are telling, if I knew that you are telling the truth, I would have already accepted you as a messenger. So he rejected Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam walked away. Now, Amr ibn Hisham looked at Mughira ibn Shu'bah, who became Muslim, by the way, later on. Mughira ibn Shu'bah said, I know that he's telling the truth. Look at Abu Jahl, the real ignorant person. His kunya, his title really fits him. Rasulullah just passed away and now he says, I know Muhammad is saying the truth. He knew Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is truthful, but there is something holding me back. What is the something holding him back? This is connected to Arqam. That's why I'm bringing the story here. Because he's the leader of Banu Makhzum. So Abu Jahl said the descendant of Qusay ibn Kilab ibn Murrah wanted that Siqaya and Ifada and the flag and the water, giving the water to the Hajjaj. The pilgrims used to come to feed them, and they had the power to carry everything they had. And now finally they had the authority in armed forces, and they had the Nadwa also. He goes, now we have sacrificed all this, gave it to them, now we are getting closer to him, and now they have profit. He goes, how are we going to compete with this now? Fine, we can compete with power, money, wealth, progeny, whatsoever. Now they got a profit. How am I going to compete? So I'm not going to. This is why he rejected Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because of his arrogance, because of his pride, because of he was in neck and neck competing with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's tribe. Okay. Now Darul Arqam is the house of Arqam radiallahu anhu, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was. He used to meet over there the Sahaba. He used to culture them about Islam. He used to build their aqidah and the iman. He used to teach them the Quran and the Sunnah that was revealed to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam until then. And he was preparing the personalities that we talk about in 3 years, especially when they were hiding from the rest of the people in Darul Arqam. Okay, now Darul Arqam, why is that important? Because one, he was one Banu Makhzum. If they find out that they are in Darul Arqam, Abu Jahl would think twice before he will raise the sword against his own men. Let's not forget about what we talk about Jahiliyyah days, the kind of a tribalism they had. They used to say in Jahiliyyah, "Unsur akhaka zaliman wa mazluman." And this became a hadith also. Later on, Rasulullah said that a different meaning. But they had a literal meaning of that, which means support your brother, he's an oppressor or oppressed. Go support them. Support how? Even if your brother is, talking about in Jahiliyyah, they used to say, even if your brother is an oppressor, go help him oppressing others. So tribalism was deeply rooted in their minds and their hearts. So he would not do that. So that became a very important place for Rasulullah's dawah. Second, it was by Mount Safa. Very close to the Kaaba, all hustle bustle is going on in the area. At the same time, they're not too far from the Harameen. So they would not think that Rasulullah would be doing the da'wah in that place. And Darul Arqam, when we say the house of Arqam radiallahu anhu, you know how old was he when he became Muslim? You'll be surprised. 7th person he was a Muslim. Some reports say he was 12 years old. The minimum says 12, max says 16, and the majority says it's about 14 years old when he became Muslim. He had the house of his own that's used for da'wah. And you have to understand, and this was not only for the first 3 years, it continued on. Many of the great Sahaba, they became Muslim in Darul Arqam. We talked about Umar al-Khattab last week. We talked about Mus'ab ibn Umair last week. They both came to Darul Arqam, became Muslim. Hamza became Muslim there. We see them there studying over there. Suhaib al-Rumi, radiallahu anhu, he became Muslim over there. and Yasir became Muslim there. So many great Sahaba, they enter into the fold of Islam, coming and learning from this small group of people. A halaqah is going on and learning from them and accepting Islam. Don't get depressed sometime when you see in a dars or something there are not that many people there. In Darul Arqam, there were very small number of people were there, and look what they achieved. But their achievement was connected to a few things. One, clarity in the Aqidah. Two, clarity in the goal, what they were going for. They were not just those goals that Rasulullah achieved, that we are Muslim today because of that, were not just accidental goals. Also, happened to become the Hakim in Medina. That's not accidental. From the beginning, the da'wah of Rasulullah was with the clarity, with the goal was there. So this is how they were developed. So let's not learn Islam in a ritualistic manner that we just use Islam for some spiritual hype that we get up to and feel like I've done something for the sake of Allah, as if we are doing a favor to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's no favor to Allah to except ourselves when we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in need of us. We are in the need of Allah Azza wa Jal. And hence, we better know what pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let's not be the one who make up the things from our own mind and think, oh, if I act this way, that will please Allah. Or if I don't talk about Islam, that part of Islam, oh, that will be better for us. Look, we are not the one who should be thinking of sugarcoating Islam or tampering Islam or changing Islam with time and so on and so forth. We are the message. We are people who have a message from Allah Azza wa Jalla that needs to be conveyed. Okay. Now about Arqam radiallahu anhu, inshallah, in a couple of minutes I'll finish it so we can take the Q&A also. Okay. Now about so Darul Arqam was, if you want to call it, even though it's a small place, that was the first madrasa of Islam. This is the first madrasa. First halaqah is happening there. The madrasa is there. Whatever you want to call them. This is what was happening in that place. So Al-Arqam radiallahu anh, he played a huge role in building the da'wah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Makkah. Okay, many verses of the Quran were revealed in Darul Arqam to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Subhanallah, what a blessed place where Jibreel came down and gave the Quran to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, talking about Arqam radiallahu anh, he was very young when he became Muslim. So today we think of them as, oh, these are kids, 12 years old, 14 years old. Look, they were men. You can be men if you want to be. And the parents have to build them as men. This Iman and the Aqidah can build us as men. But if you don't follow the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal, the way it's supposed to be, we can be 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, we will not be men. We will still be acting as childish. Okay? So the thing that makes it is the way you carry yourself. Okay? And the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal will still makes people as men and continue to make it if we follow the command of Allah Azza wa Jal the way it's supposed to be. Arqam radiallahu anh lived through the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He lived through all the Khulafa Rashideen's time as well. And he passed away 55 years after Hijrah. 55 years after Hijrah. So he lived through all that. But we don't find Arqam's too much stuff about Arqam radiallahu anh. But we know that there's nobody disagrees that Darul Arqam played a huge role in the da'wah of Islam. To the point, just Google it sometime. You will find many masajid are named as Darul Arqam. Many institutions are called Darul Arqam. So we understand the importance of it. So let's produce the personalities the way they were produced in Darul Arqam. That's why I want to learn about those personalities. So we know what was the result and the outcome of Darul Arqam. Okay? So that's the key thing to remember when we are talking about Darul Arqam. And the way Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam created those personalities, especially talking about the first 3 years, not many ahkam were there. Some talk about even there were only 2 prayers that were obligatory. Other scholars even talk about whether they were obligatory or not, whether they were done in the same way as we do today or not. So it's in the beginning, the main verses that were revealed to Rasulullah, majority of them were basically about the aqidah and the iman. And that developed a personality that resulted into any hukum were coming later on. The response of the Sahaba was Sam'ana wa ta'ana. We hear and we obey. Not like the other people who used to say Sam'ana wa asayna, that we hear and we disobey, na'udhu billah. So two people we talked about, especially today, just to make sure we remember that. Khadija radiallahu anha. So if we want to have wives like Khadija radiallahu anha, well, then we better be acting like, try to act like Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Don't hope your wives will act like Khadija when you act like Abu Jahl. Okay, so we have to think of it. Yes, we love to emulate, we love to be like them, try our best, but it should always start from ourselves. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nara, protect yourself and your families from the hellfire. Not just for your families and forget about yourself. Okay, so both have to be protected. And when we think of Khadija radiallahu anha, remember that how the response of Khadija. So our sisters, when they study Khadija radiallahu anha, there's many things to learn from that. And for the brothers as well, to learn many the way Khadija radiallahu anha, she supported Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam throughout the time, and she sacrificed her wealth for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. So if we want to have the same results as the Sahaba produced, act like them. Don't start. I don't have time for the da'wah, but I don't have the wealth is for me. I have to build a palace first, or a mansion first, and then I'll think about spending in the path of Allah Azza wa Jal. Or if I have to get some time, well, I have other things to do in my life right now. Until I get very old, I have no strength left in my body, then I'll give my time to Allah Azza wa Jal. Remember that the Sahaba who really gave the support to Rasulullah, majority of them very young Sahaba. Majority of them very young. Very few of them were there in 30s, 40s, and 50s. But doesn't mean that it's ever late. It's never too late. We always, whenever we find the haqq, we have to carry on to it. Everybody plays a different role. And you can see that. Khadija radiallahu anha played a different role than Arqam bin Arqam. Umar played a different role than Umar al-Khattab. Umar played a different role than Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu. And Ali played a different role than Uthman bin Affan. So inshallah, we'll stop our today's talk here, and jazakumullah khairan. If there is any questions or comments, I'll try to address them now, inshallah. Yes.